Yesterday, a really interesting conversation was going on over on Twitter or X, where basically after the episode of the Adam Friedland Show aired, where Ritchie Torres was on there, a couple of people tweeted out that, particularly from the Palestinian community, as I understand it, that that's just platforming Zionists, and that's normalizing Zionists. I think that was an odd thing to say when you're talking about, a sitting member of U.S. Congress, somebody who is very much in many senses already platformed, already has control of the wheels of power. Uh, any chance to confront somebody like that, I think that as an independent journalist, somebody like Adam Friedland, you've got to take that. And I tweeted something about as much, and it started to pop off and get a couple of retweets, and that led to a deeper conversation. Sorry, ignore some of this random stuff on my Twitter. Some trolls, sports trolls. Anyways, my tweet really started to take off and get a bunch of likes and retweets, and so then I started talking with another member of the Palestinian community, that at least someone who represents themselves as such online, wanted to have a deeper conversation with me about it, and so I indulged in that, and I thought it was really interesting. So they said that restricting platforming to just reach is one reason why people refuse to acknowledge, if not accept, what Palestinians in disagreement with the interview are talking about. So I said, all right, would you care to explain it? I've also seen the argument about how it centers Jewish voices and not Palestinian. And while I'm more sympathetic to that line of thought, I also think it's flawed logic in this case, this particular case, just because, again, we're not platforming a senator. I mean, if you have a chance to talk to a congressperson, you do it. If you're going to have just some random Zionist on your show, that might be a bad idea, because that is a platform that you could otherwise give to an actual affected voice, is somebody that is more tied in and representative of the struggle at hand, and not just the mainstream Zionist opinion that we get repeated and repeated and repeated. I get that they don't need platforms. So again, just random Zionists versus almost anyone else you could have almost anyone else on your show. But when we're talking about a member of Congress, you got to have that member of Congress on your show if they're down to do it, especially if you are going to challenge them. So that's where I come from there. But they said the problem is still that me restricting platforming to just reach. They say platforming also entails designating what type of content, messages, and people get through from the producer to the audience. So anybody who bothers to know Ritchie Torres knows he's a genocidal psychopath who calls anti-Zionist Jews anti-Semitic. I mean, that's true, but not everybody knows who Ritchie Torres is. Online and in leftist spaces especially, we tend to be politics nerds, so we all know who this congressperson from the Bronx is. But if you're just a normal person who goes to work every day and turns on the news, you might remember, like, oh, I've seen that guy as a talking head once or twice, but not you're not going to be intimately familiar with Ritchie Torres. Whereas, every instance of confronting Zionism has a chance to be either the first instance that somebody has of seeing it confronted, because you usually don't in mainstream media, or that has the chance to be the instance that breaks through, the instance that Zionist hypocrisy finally breaks through somebody's uh, mental gymnastics that they're doing to avoid seeing it. But I did start to, ultimately be sympathetic to the idea that there's more than one aspect to platforming someone, and it's not just increasing their reach. You're also in a lot of ways depriving somebody else of a potential platform when you give somebody a platform. So that made sense. But then somebody else earlier was sharing some actual stuff from the official BDS movement about guidelines, and that I did find to be a fair bit more interesting and directly applicable to the discussion at hand. So here we have the actual normalization guidelines from the BDS movement. And it's always good to circle back around and check on these things sometimes, because even if you have your best intentions in mind and think that you're aligned with something and aligned with the best with the intentions of the people you're trying to be good allies to, if you don't loop back in and check and make sure you're doing things the way they want now and then, you can get off base. I think that's a little bit what start has been starting to happen, and then we get instances where something that I think was a good thing. Adam Friedland really confronting Ritchie Torres on his show, but it starts to rub up against some of these other things that are going on, and that makes people lash out, I guess. Again, so according to the BDS movement, they say, what exactly is normalization? So in 2007, the Palestinian BDS National Committee, the broadest Palestinian coalition that leads the global BDS movement, adopted by consensus the following definition of what constitutes normalization and set guidelines for countering it. Normalization is the participation in any project, initiative, or activity, local or international, that brings together on the same platform Palestinians and or Arabs and Israelis, individuals or institutions, and does not meet the following two conditions. One, the Israeli side publicly recognizes the UN affirmed inalienable rights of Palestinian people, which are set out in 2005 BDS call. And two, the joint activity constitutes a form of co-resistance against Israeli regime of occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid. And so basically what they're saying here is that any activity that platforms, anti-Zionists and Israelis together should not represent the. I'm simplifying a little bit, but should not represent the mainstream Israeli Zionist viewpoint. That the Israeli side needs to publicly recognize and affirm the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. They say in the above, Israeli side refers to Jewish Israelis and Jewish Israeli institutions. Uh, so I would question whether Ritchie Torres fits that or not. But again, this is what people want us to circle around and consider. And even we have a consensus on what normalization is from the BDS movement. If we don't talk about it and talk about if specific things fit it or don't fit it, then the whole effort is for naught. And especially when we're just speaking over each other instead of really digging into what is being said here and what is meant here, then we get nowhere with it. But if anybody thinks that I have it wrong, by all means tell me, because again, it's conversation. All of this is meant to be a conversation. So it says the consensus around this definition, which followed long discussions and debates in Palestinian society, has given it its moral and political weight and authoritative legitimacy within the Palestinian, Arab, and international context. Though formally adopted in 2007, the two conditions set in the definition above have been a pillar of the BDS movement's anti-normalization work since the 2005 BDS call was launched. It says the BDS movement's anti-normalization work is based on the following understanding. Normalization as a joint activity between the oppressed and the oppressor that is not based on the recognition of the rights of the oppressed and does not aim at the elimination of oppression is an attempt by the oppressor to colonize the mind of the oppressed with the notion that oppression is a fact of life that must be coped with, not resisted. Normalization is a weapon used by Israel's apartheid regime to whitewash its regime of oppression and undermine international solidarity with the Palestinian liberation struggle using the "Don't be more Arab than the Arabs" a deceptive slogan. And so basically the concern here is that platforming the Israeli Zionist opinion only serves to subvert the true facts out there that this is a genocide currently, that Palestinians are being oppressed and have been being oppressed, that Israel is an oppressive colonial settler project, that anytime you give space to these people to present the ideas that that's not the case, you're just helping them, at least from the Arab Palestinian perspective. The other important thing to point out, though, down at the bottom. All right, so in the context of Adam Friedland interviewing Ritchie Torres. It says, why do anti-normalization guidelines apply to Arabs and not internationals? It says normalization in the BDS movement predominantly describes joint activities projects between Arabs, including Palestinians and Israelis, that morally or politically equate the oppressor and the oppressed, or whitewash oppression, thus undermining our struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. As such, normalization guidelines do not apply to relations or joint projects between internationals and Israeli individuals, regardless of the latter's positions on Palestinian rights. So long as Arabs are not involved in such projects, only the international BDS guidelines apply in those cases. So I think that that's pretty clear that at least in the sense of would that episode of the Adam Friedland Show be a boycottable project in the eyes of the BDS movement? I think not. But that's not the end all be all of it. Is does it technically fall under something that you could boycott under the BDS movement or not? They also go on to say, though, that in principle, no people should normalize apartheid or settler colonialism, regardless of background or position. However, the global context is such that people of the Arab world, with their diverse national, religious, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds and identities, whose future is more tangibly tied to the future of Palestinians than the wider international community is, are directly on the front line. And so that's the reason that they specifically want people in the Arab world to commit more strictly to these guidelines, whereas outside the Arab world, there's a little more flexibility there. But you should still avoid normalization at all times if you're following the BDS guidelines. Again, though, I think there's a lot of argument and nuance of whether this episode of the Adam Friedland Show fits that or not. I don't think that it does. There's certainly an argument to be made about how it's another piece of media that centers Jewish feelings, but I think that with a lot of things in the world, it's hard to get mad at any individual piece of media for that, because that is the perspective that Adam Friedland is coming from. He is a Jewish person. It's gonna be pretty hard for him to not talk about his feelings as a Jewish person when he lives and exists as a Jewish person. And I also think that that's not the only perspective he takes with it. He goes there in the interview, how it's hard for him as a Jewish person to live with the idea that other Jewish people are essentially carrying out a genocide in his name. But he makes sure to go out of his way and call out that the genocide itself is the larger problem, not his feelings. And in fact, there, I think it just makes for a good contrast where Adam's being really vulnerable and Ritchie Torres just comes across as like a sociopathic monster. Just looking at him there, Adam's like almost on the verge of tears, and Ritchie just can't wait to get his next APAC provided Zionist talking point in, his next snappy talking point, to get a gotcha on somebody who's trying to have an honest emotional conversation with him. But again, if anybody thinks I'm wrong about any of this, or thinks that there's a better way I could be interpreting this, let me know. But I just think it's important that when I post something on Twitter that gets a little bit of traction, like disagreeing about something being normalization, and people call me out on it. I got to engage with that. I got to go back and read about what they're talking about and at least try and understand it. And if anybody else has been watching that conversation happen over on Twitter and have been wondering what's that all about, what do people mean by normalization? In this instance, this is where this information is coming from, is from the official BDS movement, that these are consensus guidelines that took a long time to come to, but have been the consensus guidelines of the BDS movement for a long time now. So yeah, always important to circle back around and check in on stuff like that.